While several family-centric films released around Christmas time, there were only a few that were directed solely at the adult audience. One of which is Robert Eggers' much-anticipated Nosferatu. The director once again teams up with Willem Dafoe and Ralph Ineson, and brings along Nicholas Hoult and Lily Rose Depp. Now, you know I'm going to make the pun. Is this one that you should sink your teeth into? Estate agent Thomas Hutter travels to Transylvania for a fateful meeting with Count Orlok. While away, Hutter's new bride Ellen is plagued by visions and an increasing sense of dread, encountering a force far beyond her control. So I know a lot of people have been waiting for this movie. I think if you're an Eggers fan, you're already going to be on board with his style of storytelling. He brings a ton of detail into the lore, giving us visuals that are specific and well crafted. And this not only applies to the larger items like the casket or the occultish symbols that we see, but it extends to the minutiae as well, like focusing on the details of a wax seal or the contents of a locket. And here, the imagery, it's visceral and tangible, transferring the cold atmosphere of the German town this predominantly takes place in, so that then we can experience a foreboding damp chill as well. Now, if you've seen Murnau's 1922 version of Nosferatu, you're going to be a little familiar with the look and feel of Orlok with his pale skin, bald head, sharp nose, and extremely long, pointy fingers. Eggers uses this design and then makes it his own, giving Bill Skarsgård, who plays Orlok, facial hair, some long furry cloaks, and splotchy hair that kind of makes him look like a mangled vampire. One that's certainly seen better days is on the tattier side of being healthy or robust. But it doesn't diminish any of the creep factor of the character. I mean, he's a menacing force as he towers over everyone, even Nicholas Hoult, who's already a very tall person. And his speech, it's a little difficult to understand at times, heavy with an accent that could be Russian or something Eastern European. And then I'm probably in the vast minority that are going to notice this, but to me, Count Orlok sounds exactly like El Capitan from the very first episode of DuckTales, the original version. Now, he's got this incessant wheezing that he does after every sentence. It made me chuckle just about every time he was speaking. And once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. And now you won't, so you're welcome. Both Lily Rose Depp and Nicholas Hoult deliver some moving and haunted performances. At different times, they each have to showcase this primal fear that just emanates from deep within them. Not quite certain if what they're experiencing is real or a fever dream. And Hoult receives more of the focus in the first portion of the story, while Depp then takes the reins for the latter half. And I'm really impressed with the physicality of Depp and how she must morph herself just in the blink of an eye, going from innocence to devilish, calm to chaotic. There's this moment when she's fully raging, and the spit, the snot, and the dribble that just comes from her, it shows just how into the scene that she is and how she's fully committed to her character. Now, I enjoyed both Ralph Ineson and Willem Dafoe as they both add a small air of science and doubt to the tale. Both come from a science background, and while Ineson's physician is certainly more grounded, neither of them come across as eccentric or nuts, using the level-headedness to accentuate the bizarre things that are overtaking the town. Now, I was probably least impressed with how Aaron Taylor Johnson's character was developed and directed. I'm not sure what sort of accent he was attempting. Even if you're just trying to squelch his British accent a bit, what we get is this odd mix of British and American, neither of which are really strongly working. And there's also a good portion of his dialogue that consists of him repeating what somebody else says, but in a disbelieving manner. I mean, this improves later in the movie, but not before it's noticeable. There's also a great mixture of Nosferatu and Bram Stoker's Dracula, using both of those stories to tell the tale, and then centering around the obsessive desire and control that exists between the undead predator and his vulnerable prey. And there's also this inclusion of the events that happen on the Demeter. Thankfully, since we've recently had a film on this exact portion of Stoker's book, there are only brief scenes that work for continuity within the plot, but they're not prolonged or drawn out to make it dull. And while I know a lot more exists, I only started noticing iconography towards the final act of the film. One is where Dafoe is speaking with Depp and he calls her the Salvation. Very next image of her is very reminiscent of a painting of either Jesus or Mary. And there's also a very subtle image of a cross that shows on Dafoe's face as he faces out a window in one of the final scenes. I mean, these small instances, they just work to reinforce the conflict that we see play out between religion, science, and superstitions. Now, I loved how the filming techniques and the transitions are creatively beautiful and are callbacks to many of the old school methods. The camera will slowly zoom into the back of somebody's head, creating utter darkness, and then continue that zoom into a scene that transitions from dark to light. There are also a lot of panning shots that work to disorient the subject, or even us, as well as to set up some small scares. I mean, when it's attempting to set up something that makes us jump, they're obvious, so they didn't have a frightful effect on me. But the camera movements are still wonderfully executed, and they help to create a sense of momentum throughout so much of the storytelling. Now, the film is extremely dark, and while the shadowing and the use of natural light is effective in maximizing the drama and dread, if you're not watching this in an utterly dark environment, it's going to be difficult to see a lot of what's going on. And while this isn't really an issue within the theater, once this becomes available to view at home, you're going to want to make sure that you have the room as dark as possible so you won't miss a lot of the details. That being said, though, I do appreciate how a lot of this is somewhat desaturated, making the nighttime scenes even more cold and ominous. And these sequences, they appear almost black and white, but they still maintain this bluish hue that then reinforces the unease, and it maintains the chilling aesthetic. Now, I did feel the time. Not that this is boring, but some scenes felt unnecessary once the entire story had been told. Towards the beginning of the movie, as Hutter, Nicholas Hoult, is going to meet Count Orlok, we watch him travel quite a bit. Now he encounters some Romani travelers, and while their warnings and their admonitions help to build up trepidation, we don't need any of this for understanding or even terror. In the moment, hey, these are fine, but when the whole production feels long, this is a several-minute scene that could be removed and not harm the narrative at all. So at the end of this, Nosferatu is a wonderfully presented gothic horror that beautifully blends two iconic vampire stories into a horrifically romantic story of desire and obsession. Nicholas Hoult and Lily Rose Depp craft haunting personas, full of vigor and dread, but also passionate love that will increase your heart rate and then smash it to pieces. While the film is exceptionally dark and the pacing is slower with unneeded scenes, the final product is an exquisite visual feast capped by stirring performances. There's sex, nudity, a little profanity, and a lot of gruesome and visceral violence. I give Nosferatu 4.5 out of 5 couches. So what's your favorite presentation of Nosferatu or just the Dracula story? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.